March 1945. A smoky interrogation room somewhere in occupied Germany. 3 high-ranking Wehrmacht officers sat across from American intelligence personnel, their uniforms stripped of Nazi insignia, but still carrying that unmistakable arrogance that comes from years of believing you're part of a superior military machine. The lead interrogator, a tired captain from Chicago, was going through routine questions about German defensive positions when one of the prisoners, General Major Kurt Steiner, a decorated veteran of both the Eastern and Western fronts, decided to get mouthy. "You Americans," Steiner said with a smirk that made everyone in the room want to punch him, "you think you've won this war through military genius, but let me tell you the truth. Your so-called Supreme Commander Eisenhower? He's a desk general, a politician in uniform. He's never led men into battle, never heard a shot fired in anger. He coordinates, he administers, he shuffles papers. That's not generalship, that's bureaucracy." The American officers in the room stiffened, but Steiner wasn't done. He was on a roll, and like most arrogant men who've just lost everything, he was desperate to win something, even if it was just an argument. And MacArthur in the Pacific? Same thing. A peacock who poses for photographers and issues grandiose statements from hundreds of miles behind the lines. You Americans don't have real combat generals. You have managers. You have office workers playing soldiers. The captain conducting the interrogation opened his mouth to respond, but Steiner cut him off. The only exception is Patton. He's the only one of your generals who actually understands warfare, who leads from the front. But even he's hamstrung by your desk generals back at SHAEF headquarters. If Patton had been given full authority, if he didn't have to answer to paper pushers like Eisenhower, this war would have been over 6 months ago. But your system promotes politicians, not warriors. That's why it took you so long to beat us. That's why, man for man, German soldiers are superior. Because we follow real generals, and you follow desk jockeys. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the concrete floor. The American officers looked at each other, unsure how to respond to this absolutely blistering insult to the entire American command structure. And that's when the captain made a decision that would change everything. He stood up, excused himself, and walked straight to the communications room. 20 minutes later, he was on a secure line to 3rd Army headquarters, and 30 minutes after that, he was personally briefing General George S. Patton on exactly what the German general had said. Now here's where this story gets absolutely legendary. And if you're watching this from anywhere in America, whether you're tuning in from New York, Texas, California, or some small town in the heartland, you need to hear what happened next. Because this is the kind of moment that defines not just Patton, but what American leadership actually means. Drop a comment right now and tell us what state you're watching from, because this story is pure American pride, and we want to know where our audience is representing from. And listen, if you want more stories like this, real historical accounts that show you what actually happened when someone disrespected American generals, when someone questioned American fighting spirit, when someone needed to be taught a lesson they'd never forget, then you better hit that subscribe button right now. Smash that like button if you're already feeling patriotic just hearing this setup. And here's what we need from you. After you hear what Patton did in response to this insult, drop a comment with your honest opinion. Did he go too far? Or was this exactly the response that arrogance deserved? Because what Patton did next wasn't just about defending Eisenhower and MacArthur. It was about defending the entire concept of American military leadership and proving that there's a dozen different ways to be a great general, and all of them work if you're smart enough to use them right. Share this video with any veteran, any active service member, any American who needs to be reminded that our military tradition isn't about copying anybody else's model. It's about doing things the American way and winning anyway. Now let's get back to that moment when the communications officer told Patton exactly what the German general had said about Ike and MacArthur. Patton listened to the report in complete silence, his face unreadable, his hands folded on his desk. When the officer finished, Patton sat there for a solid 30 seconds without speaking, and everyone in the room knew that silence meant the general was thinking, calculating, planning something that would probably be brilliant and definitely be memorable. Finally, Patton looked up and asked a single question. "This General Major Steiner, he specifically said that I'm the only real combat general America has? That Eisenhower and MacArthur are just desk generals?" The communications officer nodded. "Yes, sir." Those were essentially his words. He suggested that you're being held back by politicians in uniform. And that's when Patton smiled. Not a happy smile. Not a friendly smile. But that predatory, shark-like smile that every officer in Third Army had learned meant someone was about to get absolutely demolished. "Well," Patton said slowly, "isn't that interesting? General Major Steiner thinks he's paying me a compliment while insulting my colleagues. He thinks he's being clever, driving a wedge between American generals by praising one at the expense of others. What he doesn't understand is that American generals, real American generals, don't operate on the German model. We don't need one Frere figure to worship. We work as a team, each man contributing what he does best. And if General Major Steiner can't understand that, then I'm going to have to educate him." Patton stood up and started pacing, which everyone recognized as the sign that orders were about to be issued. "Here's what we're going to do. I want General Major Steiner and his fellow critics brought to Third Army headquarters. I want them here within 24 hours. And I'm going to personally give them a master class in why Eisenhower and MacArthur are brilliant generals, why their desk general model is actually superior to the German system of frontline heroics, and why Germany lost this war not despite having warrior generals but because of them." The staff officers exchanged glances. This was going to be good. Nobody could dismantle an argument quite like Patton when he was motivated, and right now he was highly motivated. Not because his ego was bruised, Patton's ego was just fine, but because someone had disrespected his fellow American commanders, and Patton wasn't about to let that slide. See, here's what most people don't understand about Patton, and what that German general definitely didn't understand. Patton could be arrogant, he could be controversial, he could be a massive pain in the ass to work with, but he was absolutely loyal to the American command structure and to his fellow generals. He and Eisenhower had their differences. Sure, he thought Montgomery was an overrated prima donna. Absolutely. But when an enemy general tried to play divide and conquer by praising Patton while insulting Ike and MacArthur, that was crossing a line, and Patton was about to make that German general regret every word. The next morning, General Major Kurt Steiner and his two fellow officers were transported under heavy guard to Patton's headquarters in a commandeered German mansion. They were brought into a large conference room where Patton was waiting along with about a dozen American staff officers, a stenographer to record everything, and, this is important, a large map table showing both the European and Pacific theaters of operation. Patton didn't acknowledge the German officers right away. He let them stand there for a solid 5 minutes while he finished reviewing some papers, making them wait, making them uncomfortable, establishing dominance before a single word was spoken. Classic Patton. Finally, he looked up, fixed Steiner with those ice-blue eyes that had stared down German generals from Rommel to von Rundstedt, and spoke in a voice that was calm, conversational, and absolutely dripping with controlled contempt. "General Major Steiner," Patton began, his voice smooth as Tennessee whiskey but with a bite like broken glass. "I understand you have some opinions about American generalship. Specifically, you seem to think that General Eisenhower and General MacArthur are what you called desk generals, politicians in uniform who don't understand real combat. Is that an accurate summary of your statement?" Steiner, still carrying that arrogance despite being a prisoner, nodded. "It is an objective military assessment, General Patton. No disrespect to you personally, but your supreme commander has never led troops in combat. He's an administrator, a coordinator. In the German military, Such a man would never achieve supreme command. Patton nodded slowly, as if seriously considering this perspective. Then he walked over to the map table and gestured for Steiner to join him. "Come here, General Major." "You too," he said to the other two German officers. "I'm going to give you gentlemen a free education in why you lost this war. And it has everything to do with your fundamental misunderstanding of what generalship actually means in modern warfare." The Germans approached the table warily, unsure where this was going. Patton pointed to the map of Europe, specifically to the massive scope of Allied operations from North Africa through Sicily, Italy, Normandy, and now deep into Germany itself. "You see this, General Major? This represents the largest amphibious invasion in human history, followed by the coordination of millions of men, thousands of aircraft, naval vessels, supply chains stretching across an ocean, and military operations across an entire continent. And you know who planned and coordinated all of that? The desk General Dwight D. Eisenhower." Patton's voice took on an edge. "Now, you seem to think that because Eisenhower doesn't personally lead bayonet charges, he's not a real general. Let me explain something to you about modern warfare that apparently the German High Command never figured out. Wars at this scale aren't won by individual heroics. They're won by logistics, coordination, alliance management, and strategic vision. And Eisenhower is a goddamn master at all of it." He moved his hand across the map, tracing supply lines and operational zones. "Eisenhower manages coalition warfare, keeping Americans, British, Canadians, French, and a dozen other nationalities working together toward common objectives. Do you have any idea how difficult that is? Your German generals only had to deal with German troops, and whatever reluctant allies you could bully into helping. Eisenhower has to balance competing national interests, manage egos the size of mountains, including mine, I'll admit, and still maintain a unified command structure that actually wins battles. That's not being a desk general, General Major. That's being a strategic genius." Steiner opened his mouth to object, but Patton wasn't done. Not even close. "And let's talk about what your warrior general model got you, shall we? You had Rommel, brilliant tactical commander, who won impressive victories in North Africa. And where did that get Germany? Defeated in Africa. You had Manstein, tactical genius on the Eastern Front, still lost in the East. You had Guderian, pioneer of panzer warfare. And yet here you are, defeated, occupied, your country in ruins. You know why? Because your system promotes generals who are great at winning battles, but terrible at winning wars." This landed like a hammer blow. You could see it in Steiner's face. The sudden uncertainty, the first crack in his arrogant fade. Patton pressed the advantage like a tank through weak defensive lines. Your warrior generals were so focused on tactical brilliance, on personal glory, on fighting from the front, that they never developed the strategic and logistical systems needed to actually win a modern industrial war. Meanwhile, our desk General Eisenhower built the most effective military supply chain in human history, coordinated air and ground operations across multiple theaters, and managed alliance politics so skillfully that we're standing in Germany right now while you're a prisoner. So tell me, General Major, who's the better general? The one who leads heroic charges, or the one who actually wins the damn war? The room was silent, except for the scratching of the stenographer's pen. The other American officers were trying not to smile, watching Patton dismantle the German general's entire worldview with surgical precision. But Patton wasn't finished. He moved to the Pacific Theater map. "And now let's discuss General MacArthur, who you also dismissed as a desk general. Douglas MacArthur has coordinated island-hopping campaigns across thousands of miles of ocean, managed combined Army-Navy operations in the most difficult terrain imaginable, and is systematically destroying the Japanese Empire with a fraction of the resources that were allocated to Europe. And he's doing it while managing occupation of conquered territories, coordinating with Australian and Filipino forces, and conducting amphibious operations that make D-Day look simple by comparison." Patton looked directly at Steiner. "MacArthur doesn't lead from the front. because that's not where he's most effective. He's most effective coordinating carrier groups, planning multi-stage amphibious assaults, and managing theater-wide strategy. That's not a weakness, General Major. That's understanding where a senior commander adds the most value, something your German generals apparently never figured out. Now here's where Patton delivered the knockout punch, and folks, if you're watching this and you've ever had to defend American exceptionalism to some know-it-all who thinks European military tradition is superior, you're gonna love this next part. Actually, before we get to that, let me just say, if you're enjoying this story, if you're feeling that surge of American pride hearing Patton defend our generals and our way of doing things, do us a solid and hit that like button right now, and drop a comment telling us which branch of service you or your family members served in. Because this story is for everyone who's ever worn the uniform or supported someone who has. We're building a community here of people who love real history, not Hollywood versions. And we want to hear from you. Now, back to Patton absolutely destroying this German general's entire argument. Patton walked back to his desk and pulled out a folder. Let me share some statistics with you, General Major, since you seem to value objective military assessment. In the 4 years that America has been actively fighting this war, our desk generals have coordinated operations that resulted in the complete defeat of Italy, the liberation of France, the destruction of German military power in the West, and the near-total annihilation of Japanese naval and air forces in the Pacific. Your warrior generals, who've been fighting since 1939, have managed to lose on every front, destroy your own country, and get millions of Germans killed for absolutely nothing. He opened the folder and read from it. The Allied supply chain, organized primarily by Eisenhower's staff, moves more tonnage in a single month than the entire German logistics system moved in a year. Our coordination between air and ground forces is so effective that German troops won't move in daylight. Our intelligence integration is so superior that we knew about the Ardennes offensive before some of your own commanders did. This isn't luck, General Major. This is the result of having desk generals who understand modern warfare better than your warrior generals ever did. Steiner's face had gone from arrogant to pale. The other 2 German officers looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. But Patton still wasn't done, because he was about to make a point about American military culture that would hit even harder. Here's what you fundamentally misunderstand about American generalship, and it's the same thing every European military has misunderstood about America since 1776. You think warfare is about individual heroism, personal glory, and warrior traditions. We think warfare is about solving problems efficiently and going home. You build your military around creating legends. We build our military around winning and getting it over with. He leaned forward, his voice intense. Eisenhower doesn't need to lead from the front to prove his courage. He proved his value by planning and executing the most complex military operation in history. MacArthur doesn't need to storm beaches personally to demonstrate leadership. He demonstrates it by outthinking his enemies and achieving objectives with minimal casualties. That's not being a desk general. That's being a smart general. And smart beats heroic every single time. Patton stood up straight, his voice taking on a different tone, still hard, but with a note of something almost like pity. You German generals were so in love with your warrior mythology, so obsessed with Prussian military tradition and tactical brilliance, that you forgot the actual objective of war, winning it. You got your men killed by the millions in heroic last stands and brilliant tactical retreats. Meanwhile, our desk generals figured out how to win battles without unnecessary casualties, how to use industrial capacity as a weapon, and how to coordinate multinational forces toward strategic objectives. And that's why I'm standing here in a nice German mansion, and you're standing there as a prisoner. The German officers stood in stunned silence. Steiner looked like he'd been punched in the gut. his entire framework for understanding military excellence shattered by Patton's systematic demolition of every assumption he'd held. And then, Patton delivered the final blow, the one that would haunt Steiner for the rest of his life. You said I was the only real American general because I lead from the front, because I fit your idea of what a general should be. But here's the truth, General Major. I'm effective because I have desk generals like Eisenhower, handling the strategic and logistical complexity that I don't have the patience for. Ike lets me do what I do best, drive my army forward, because he's handling everything else. That's not a weakness. That's a perfect division of labor. That's why we have different types of generals, each playing to their strengths. He walked closer to Steiner, his voice dropping. I don't want Eisenhower's job. I'm not suited for it. I'd be terrible at managing coalition politics and supply logistics. But Ike's brilliant at it, which frees me to be brilliant at what I do. That's how a mature military operates. You put people where they're most effective, not where they look most heroic. And the fact that you can't understand that is exactly why Germany lost this war. Patton turned to his staff. Take these officers back to their holding facility. Make sure they get copies of the transcripts of this conversation. I want them to have plenty of time to think about what we discussed. As the MPs prepared to escort the Germans out, Steiner found his voice one more time. General Patton, if what you say is true, if Eisenhower is such a brilliant strategic mind, why does he hold you back? Why doesn't he let you advance as fast as you want? And Patton's response was the perfect ending to this whole masterclass in American military leadership. Patton actually laughed at that question, a genuine, almost appreciative laugh, and he turned back to face Steiner one more time. You still don't get it, do you? You think Eisenhower holds me back because he's timid or because he doesn't understand warfare. That's not why he does it. He holds me back because his job is to win the war, not individual battles. And sometimes winning the war means restraining your most aggressive commanders so they don't outrun their supply lines, expose their flanks, or create political problems that undermine the alliance. Patton walked back to the map table and pointed to the current positions of Allied forces. Every time Ike has held me back, it's been for sound strategic reasons. When I wanted to drive straight to Berlin, he stopped me because we'd agreed the Russians would take Berlin, and maintaining that alliance was more important than my ego. When I wanted to outrun my fuel supplies, he stopped me because having tanks without gas doesn't win battles. When I wanted to ignore Montgomery's flank, he stopped me because coordinated advances beat individual glory every single time. He looked directly at Steiner. That's what a supreme commander does, General Major. He sees the whole board, not just one piece. And yeah, sometimes that pisses me off. Sometimes I argue with him. Sometimes I think I know better. But you know what? More often than not, Ike's right. Because his job is strategic vision, and he's damn good at it. That's not being a desk general. That's being the kind of general who actually wins world wars. Steiner absorbed this, and you could see the wheels turning in his head. The fundamental recalibration happening as years of certainty about German military superiority crashed against the reality of total defeat. Patton pressed on, because he wasn't just educating this one German general. He was making a statement about American military excellence that would ripple through POW camps across Europe. Here's the real difference between American generals and German generals, and I want you to really hear this. Your system created brilliant tacticians who couldn't see past the next battle. Our system created strategic thinkers who sometimes lose battles but always win wars. Your generals were artists, dramatic, heroic, individually brilliant. Our generals are engineers, practical, systematic, focused on outcomes rather than glory. And in modern industrial warfare, engineers beat artists every single time. He gestured to his staff officers. Every one of these men could tell you stories about times when Eisenhower made decisions that seemed overly cautious, when MacArthur seemed too theatrical, when Bradley seemed too methodical. But you know what? We're standing in Germany right now. Berlin is surrounded. Your country is defeated. Japan is being systematically destroyed. So maybe, just maybe, our desk generals knew what the hell they were doing. Now, folks watching this, I gotta pause here and tell you something important, because this moment right here is what makes America different, and it's why we keep winning when everyone counts us out. Europeans, and Germans especially, they've got this thing about military tradition, about warrior culture, about doing things the way they've always been done, because that's how great powers operate. But America? We don't care about tradition. We care about what works. We'll put a farm boy from Kansas in charge of the largest military operation in history, if he's the best man for the job. We'll coordinate with allies we fought against 20 years earlier, if that's what it takes to win. We'll completely reinvent warfare if the old ways aren't cutting it. That's the American way. Practical, innovative, focused on results rather than romance. And that's exactly what Patton was explaining to this German general who couldn't understand why America's desk generals were kicking Germany's ass up and down Europe. If that resonates with you, if you're proud of that uniquely American approach to problem solving, then show us some love. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us what you think makes American military leadership special. We want to build a community of people who appreciate real history and understand what actually made America successful in World War II. And trust me, we've got dozens more stories like this one that'll make you proud to be American. Now let's get back to Patton putting the final nails in the coffin of German military arrogance. Let me tell you one more thing about Eisenhower. Patton continued, his voice taking on a tone of genuine respect that surprised even his own staff. In 1943, Ike had to manage Operation Torch, the North Africa landings, which involved coordinating American, British, and French forces in a complex amphibious operation, while simultaneously managing political negotiations with Vichy French commanders who might or might not shoot at us. It was a diplomatic and military nightmare. And you know what Eisenhower did? He pulled it off. He kept the alliance together, got French commanders to switch sides without massive bloodshed, and established a beachhead that led to the destruction of the Afrika Korps. Patton pointed at Steiner. Could Rommel have done that? Hell no. Rommel was a brilliant battlefield commander, but he had the political sophistication of a tank. Could any of your warrior generals have managed the alliance politics, the logistical complexity, the diplomatic finesse required for that operation? Not a chance. Because your military culture doesn't value those skills. You think they're beneath real warriors. And that blind spot is exactly why you lost. He moved to stand directly in front of the three German officers. MacArthur in the Pacific, same thing. He's not just fighting Japanese forces, he's managing Australian sensitivities, coordinating with Navy commanders who don't want to take orders from an Army general, dealing with supply lines that stretch across thousands of miles of ocean, and planning operations that require perfect synchronization of land, sea, and air forces. That requires a completely different skill set than leading panzer divisions, and it's just as important. More important, actually, because tactical brilliance means nothing if your strategic framework is flawed. Steiner finally spoke up, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier arrogance. General Patton, are you saying that Germany lost because our generals were too focused on battlefield excellence and not enough on strategic coordination? Patton nodded. That's exactly what I'm saying. You had some of the best tactical commanders in the world. Rommel, Manstein, Guderian, all brilliant at what they did. But your system never developed the kind of strategic and logistical thinking that modern warfare requires. You were still fighting World War I with better tanks, while we completely reimagined what industrial warfare could be. He walked back to the map table one more time. Look at this map. Really look at it. The Allies are coordinating operations from North Africa to Norway, from the Atlantic to the Elbe River. We're managing supply chains that cross oceans. We're integrating air power, naval power, and ground forces in ways that your general staff never even conceptualized. And we're doing it with a military that barely existed 5 years ago, led by generals who your professional officer corps dismissed as amateurs. Patton's voice hardened. You called Eisenhower a desk general like it was an insult. But desk work, logistics, coordination, alliance management, strategic, planning, that's what wins modern wars. Heroic cavalry charges and brilliant tactical maneuvers make for great stories, but they don't defeat industrial powers. The system beats heroism, coordination beats individual brilliance, and strategic vision beats tactical genius. That's the lesson of this war, General Major. And you learned it the hard way. The room fell silent. Even the American officers, who had heard Patton's speeches and lectures dozens of times, were impressed by this systematic dismantling of German military mythology. Steiner stood there, visibly processing the implications of everything he'd heard, his entire understanding of military excellence being forcibly reconstructed. Patton's final statement was delivered in a quieter voice, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. When this war is over and you go home to Germany, you're going to hear a lot of myths about why you lost. You'll hear that it was because of Hitler's incompetence, or because Germany was outnumbered, or because of betrayal from within. Those are comfortable lies that let you preserve your sense of military superiority. But the truth is simpler and harder. You lost because American generals, including the desk generals you mock, were better at their jobs than German generals were at theirs. We outthought you, outorganized you, outcoordinated you, and yes, we outfought you. Not because individual American soldiers were superior warriors, but because our entire system, from strategic planning to logistical support to alliance management, was superior to yours. He gestured to the MPs. Now get these officers out of my headquarters. Make sure they get fed. Make sure they're treated according to the Geneva Convention. And make sure they have plenty of time to think about what we discussed here today. As Steiner was being escorted out, he turned back one more time. General Patton, may I ask one final question? Patton nodded. You've earned the right. If you could choose, would you rather be Eisenhower or yourself? Patton didn't hesitate. I'd rather be exactly who I am, doing exactly what I'm doing, supported by exactly the kind of desk general that Eisenhower is. Because together, we're unbeatable. Separately, we'd both be less effective. That's what you Germans never understood. American strength comes from combining different talents, not from worshiping one model of leadership. And with that, Steiner was escorted out, leaving Patton alone with his staff. One of his colonels spoke up, "Sir, that was one hell of a defense of General Eisenhower. I didn't know you had it in you." Patton smiled. "I may think Ike is too cautious sometimes, and I may argue with his decisions, and I may complain about being held back, but he's my commander. He's my fellow American general, and I'll be damned if I let some defeated German general talk shit about him. Ike's doing his job brilliantly, even if it drives me crazy sometimes. And that German needed to understand that before he spread his poison through the POW camps." The story of Patton's defense of Eisenhower and MacArthur spread quickly through American forces and POW camps alike. German officers who had consoled themselves with myths of tactical superiority found those myths challenged by one of the few American generals they actually respected. And Eisenhower himself, when he heard about it, simply smiled and said, "George and I may fight like cats and dogs, but we're both American cats and dogs. Nobody else gets to criticize him, and apparently nobody gets to criticize me either." If this story gave you a new appreciation for American military leadership, for the different kinds of excellence that made us successful in World War II, for the way American generals combined their different talents into an unstoppable force, then we need you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel, because we're bringing you these stories every single week. Real history, told with the drama and detail it deserves. Hit that like button if this made you proud to be American. And drop a comment with your answer to this question. Who do you think was more important to winning World War II? The desk generals like Eisenhower, who planned and coordinated everything, or the frontline generals like Patton, who executed those plans aggressively? There's no wrong answer, and we want to hear your perspective. Share this video with veterans, with history buffs, with anyone who needs to understand that American military excellence comes in many forms, and all of them matter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story, where we explore another moment when American soldiers, American generals, and American values proved that we don't just fight wars, we revolutionize how they're fought and won.